Beloved, let us enter this moment with a sense of stillness, for it is only in stillness that the truth can be heard, not the truth of the world, not the truth of the human mind, but the truth that whispers beneath all appearances, and it is to this deeper truth that you have been called. There comes a time in the life of every earnest seeker when something within begins to stir. You cannot explain it, you did not choose it, and yet it rises. A quiet dissatisfaction appears not as complaint, but as a knowing that the life you have lived, the identity you have carried, the concerns that once held your attention are no longer enough. They no longer satisfy. They no longer fit. And when that moment comes, there is often a sense of aloneness, not because the world has abandoned you, but because you are leaving behind a world that no longer speaks to your soul. You see, the world of the personal self, its fears, its ambitions, its anxieties, its noise, has been the atmosphere in which you walked for many years. You breathed it. You accepted it. You believed it. And then, one day, without knowing why or how, the veil begins to thin. You begin to sense that there is something deeper at the center of your being, something more real than the person you thought yourself to be. And in that holy transition, you may feel alone, but hear this carefully. The loneliness you feel is not a sign of abandonment. It is the sign of awakening. It is the outer evidence that the inner light is beginning to dawn. It is the moment when the personal sense, losing its hold, cries out in fear and calls that fear loneliness. But the one who is awakening in you, the eye of your being, knows no such thing as loneliness. Loneliness belongs only to the false belief that you are a separate, isolated, limited creature moving through a world of other separate creatures. And as that belief dissolves, it leaves behind a temporary shadow, a hollow space where the old identity used to sit. Many have mistaken this hollow space for emptiness. Many have tried to fill it again with activity, relationship, distraction, or noise. But if you will allow that space to remain unfilled, even for a moment, you will discover that what appears as loneliness is in truth the clearing of consciousness, preparing for the revelation of the presence. You are not being isolated. You are being invited. Invited away from the crowded marketplace of human thought. Invited away from the world's fears and opinions. Invited into a deeper chamber within your own being, where the still small voice can be heard. When Jesus went into the wilderness, he was not escaping the world. He was entering the silence in which the presence can reveal itself. And when you find yourself in what feels like wilderness, when familiarity drops away, when the old support collapses, when you feel that no one fully understands what is happening in you, know that you are in the very same sacred territory, for every spiritual birth requires a period of separation. Every revelation requires a silence preceding it. Every awakening emerges from a solitary stillness in which the soul turns inward and says, "Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth." When the world no longer satisfies, it is not because something is wrong with the world. It is because something true is waking within you, and truth can never again be satisfied with shadows. So do not fear this sense of aloneness. Do not rush to escape it. Do not try to fill it with noise or company or constant movement. Be still with it. For this aloneness is not a void. It is the beginning of union. It is the doorway through which the infinite enters your awareness. And soon you will see this loneliness will reveal itself as the birthplace of communion. Communion with the eternal presence that has always lived within you, though you had not yet turned inward to recognize it. Let us move gently into this deeper understanding, for what appears as loneliness is only the first flicker of spiritual vision, the first light of dawn on the path that leads from personal sense to Christ consciousness. Beloved, let us continue in the same stillness, for truth cannot be heard by the restless mind, it must be received in the quiet of the heart. There is a phrase often spoken in mystical language, the chosen ones. But understand this, no one is chosen above another. No one is singled out for divine favor, nor marked by heaven with privilege. God plays no favorites, for God is the same infinite presence expressing as the life of every being. So what, then, does it mean to be chosen? It means simply this. You have responded. You have responded to a call that many have felt but few have recognized, a call that does not come in thunder or vision, but in a subtle dissatisfaction, a quiet longing, a restlessness that no human accomplishment can soothe. You have responded to a whisper that said, there is more than this. There is deeper truth. There is a life behind your life, and it is calling you home. You did not choose the path. The path chose you the moment you listened. And once you listen, once you permit that inner pull to draw you inward, life cannot continue as it was. People who once felt close may no longer understand you. Interests you once shared with others may lose their flavor. The world that once seemed solid and appealing may begin to fade like a dream upon waking. This is not because the world has rejected you. It is because you have ceased to belong to the collective dream of separation. When truth begins its work in a soul, the old structures must fall away, not by force, but by the natural law of consciousness. As light breaks into a darkened room, the shadows flee, not because they are punished, but because they cannot remain in the presence of illumination. So it is with you. You have been touched by an inner light, not of your making, not of your intellect, not of your will. And because of that light, you can no longer live as one who is blind. You cannot cling to the old patterns, the old fears, the old beliefs, the old conversations, the old identity. They simply no longer fit. You have outgrown them. And any time growth occurs, there is a period in which the old has fallen away and the new has not yet fully appeared. That is the interval the world calls loneliness. But spiritually, it is the holy gap between the old self and the revealed self. You see, those on the spiritual path do not walk alone because they are rejected. They walk alone because they cannot walk where they once walked. They cannot walk in fear when they have glimpsed the presence. They cannot walk in judgment when they have tasted compassion. They cannot walk in limitation when they have felt the thrill of infinity stirring within. They cannot walk in superficiality when the heart has awakened to reverence. The chosen ones walk alone because they are being led gently, lovingly into the chamber of the soul where only the presence may guide them. The world, with its noise and speed and chatter, cannot accompany you into this inner sanctuary. Even those you love cannot walk with you there. Not because they are unworthy, not because you are superior, but because the inner work is individual, silent, and sacred. This is why Jesus so often withdrew from the crowds. This is why the mystics retreated into deserts, forests, and inner silence. It was not escape, it was alignment. It was turning toward the one who alone reveals truth. And so, when you find yourself walking a path that seems empty of human companionship, Know that there is a deeper companionship drawing near. You are being prepared to receive guidance, not from books, not from teachers, not from human voices alone, but from the living presence within your own being. You are walking alone only because you are walking toward oneness. You are leaving the multiplicity of the personal mind and entering the unity of the Christ mind. And that transformation cannot be shared in its early stages. It must ripen in the silence of your own heart. Do not fear this solitude. It is not exile, it is consecration. For in this sacred aloneness, the presence will reveal itself not as a distant God, not as an external power, but as the I that lives as you, beloved. Let us rest again in the silence for a moment, for only in silence does truth rise to the surface of consciousness. And as we enter this next understanding, I ask you to set aside every notion you have held about loneliness, every belief you have carried about being cut off, forgotten, or unseen, for these beliefs belong not to your true self, but to the personal sense of self that has no foundation in truth. Let us look deeply now at what seems to be isolation, the sense of being alone, the feeling of being cut off from companionship, the ache of not being understood. These are not conditions of spirit. These are not conditions of the I that you truly are. These sensations belong only to the personal self, the limited identity we have mistakenly assumed for so long. And when that personal identity begins to lose its place in consciousness, it cries out, it trembles, it resists, it whispers its last defense. I am alone. But hear me now. That which says I am alone is not the real I at all. It is the echo of a belief in separation, a belief in vulnerability, a belief in a life dependent on other persons for its sense of completeness. You see, the personal self has always been alone because it has always believed itself to be separate from God, separate from Source, separate from others, separate from life itself. The personal sense of self is born of separation, lives in separation, and interprets everything through the lens of separation. When it speaks of loneliness, it is merely confessing its own nature. But you, your true being, are not the personal self. You are not its fears. You are not its history. You are not its limitations, nor its narratives, nor its trembling belief in abandonment. You are the infinite appearing as individual consciousness. The loneliness you feel, then, is not a spiritual condition. It is not a statement of truth. It is simply the sensation produced when the personal identity begins to dissolve in the light of awakening. As the false self loses traction, as the ego loosens its hold, there is a space, an interval, in which the old identity has faded and the new awareness has not yet stabilized. In that space, the mind interprets the release as loss. It interprets the dissolution of illusion as absence. It interprets silence as emptiness. But spiritual silence is not emptiness. Spiritual silence is fullness without form. The mind says, I am alone, but the spirit whispers, be still and know that I am God. The mind cries, no one understands me, but the spirit answers, I in the midst of thee am mighty. The mind fears, I am losing everything familiar, but the spirit reveals, you are shedding only what was never you, beloved. If you can see this clearly, if even for one moment you can recognize that the sense of isolation belongs only to the unreal identity, you will discover a freedom beyond anything the world can offer. There is no isolation in God. There is no separation in the I am. There is no aloneness in the infinite presence that constitutes your being. When you touch even lightly the realization that you are not a personality seeking God, but God expressing as your individuality, the illusion of isolation begins to dissolve of its own accord, not through effort, not through self-analysis, not through trying to attract companionship, but through the simple recognition of truth. For what is there to be alone when infinity is your identity? How can you be abandoned when omnipresence is the essence of your being? How can you be isolated when God is the life, the breath, the awareness, functioning as you? Loneliness has no reality in the Christ. Isolation has no place in the presence. The sense of being alone is nothing more than a passing shadow cast by a self that is disappearing. Do not cling to the shadow. Let it pass, for as it passes, something wondrous begins to dawn, a sense of inner companionship, not dependent on persons, not dependent on circumstances, not dependent on the world at all. This companionship is not metaphorical. It is not imagined. It is not symbolic. It is the living presence revealing itself within your own consciousness. And when that revelation comes, even if softly, even if briefly, you will know beyond any human doubt that you have never been, nor could ever be, and alone. Let us move now into a deeper recognition. Beloved, we have seen that loneliness belongs only to the personal sense of self. But let us open our awareness to what replaces that sense when it dissolves. For the moment the false falls away, the true begins to shine forth. And what shines forth is not merely comfort, nor confidence, nor emotional reassurance, but something infinitely greater, the living companionship of the I am. This companionship is not something you acquire. It is not something you earn. It is not something you summon. It is the very nature of your being. You are not a solitary creature trying to reach a distant God. You are not an isolated identity calling out into the void for a presence that seems to remain silent. You are the place where the infinite expresses. You are, in truth, the very avenue through which the I am reveals itself. Goldsmith often said, "The presence goes before you, walks beside you, and stands behind you." But this is not figurative language. It is literal, though not literal to the senses, literal to spirit. For the presence that accompanies you does not come from outside. It arises from the depth of your own being. You may ask, how do I know this presence? You do not know it as you know objects. You do not know it as you know thoughts. You do not know it as you know emotions. You know it the way you know you are. You know it intuitively, silently, directly. The companionship of the I am is the felt awareness of a life not your own, yet utterly yours, a mind not your own, yet functioning as you, a love not your own, yet beating at the center of your heart. This presence is not an influence. It is not an energy. It is not a force moving upon you. It is yourself. And when the personal sense quiets, even for a moment, you begin to feel this inner companionship, not as a sensation, not as a mystical experience, but as a quiet certainty that you are upheld by something greater than yourself, something that is not separate from yourself. You may be sitting alone in a room, and yet the room feels full. You may be walking down a silent path, yet you feel accompanied. You may be facing uncertainty, yet you feel a calm that has no source in human reasoning. This is the I am revealing itself. It comes as stillness. It comes as peace. It comes as a gentle awareness that you are being carried. And it comes most clearly when you stop trying to find God. Goldsmith taught that the presence is discovered not through effort, but through awareness, not through struggle to reach God, but through the realization that God has never ceased to reach you. The moment you stop striving for spiritual experience, you open the door to the one who has been present all along. There is a companionship within you that is beyond human companionship. It cannot leave you. It cannot fail you. It cannot betray you. It cannot die, for it is the infinite expressing as the very consciousness you call I. When you recognize this, not intellectually, but in the quiet of inner listening, loneliness dissolves, not because you have found someone, but because you have discovered the one who was never absent. As you move through your day, practice this simple recognition. I am never alone, for the I that I am is God. I walk with the presence because the presence walks as me. Where I am, God is, and where God is, companionship is. Do not seek signs. Do not wait for feelings. Do not expect miracles. Simply rest in the truth that the life within you is infinite, and therefore cannot be solitary. As this realization deepens, the world around you begins to change, not because you have altered it, but because your awareness has shifted. You see differently. You listen differently. You walk through life with a quiet radiance that others may not understand but will unmistakably feel. They will sense a peace in you they cannot define. They will feel a presence in you they cannot name. They will notice that you carry something invisible yet undeniable. That something is the companionship of the I am. It is not exclusive to mystics. It is not reserved for saints. It is not granted to the special few. It is the truth of your being now, in this moment, whether you know it or not. Your task is only to recognize it, to become aware of what already is, to let the false sense of isolation yield to the eternal fact of oneness. For in the light of that oneness, all loneliness disappears, not by addition, but by revelation. You discover that companionship is not something you seek. Companionship is something you are, beloved. As we continue this journey into the recognition of the I am within, we must speak tenderly and honestly about something that touches every seeker's heart, the way relationships begin to shift, sometimes gently, sometimes abruptly when spiritual awakening unfolds. This is not a subject to fear, but a truth to understand. For without understanding, one might misinterpret these changes, thinking something has gone wrong, thinking that life is taking away companionship, or imagining that awakening must come at the cost of love. But hear me now. Awakening never removes love. It removes illusion. And when illusion dissolves, relationships do not diminish. They clarify. Let us look at this with spiritual eyes. You have lived many years, identified as a personal self, a bundle of memories, beliefs, opinions, preferences, fears, and desires, and those around you responded to that personal self. They knew the mask you wore, the role you played, the identity you defended. They knew the version of you that lived in the world of effects, the world of reaction, the world of separation. But when the inner light begins to stir, when the presence begins to reveal itself, when the I am becomes more real to you than the persona you once believed yourself to be, something in your vibration changes. You no longer speak the language of fear. You no longer find nourishment in complaining. You no longer join the chorus of limitation. You no longer agree with the world's verdict of lack, sickness, conflict, or despair. You no longer identify yourself or anyone else by their appearances. And so, without trying, without intending, without announcing anything, you begin to live differently, and those around you feel it. Some will sense your peace and wish to draw near. Some will feel your silence and become uncomfortable. Some will misinterpret your detachment as indifference. Some will accuse you of changing, and indeed you have, though not outwardly, but inwardly, you have changed kingdoms. You have stepped from the kingdom of personal sense into the atmosphere of spirit, and the two do not operate by the same law. This is why certain relationships fall away, not through rejection, not through bitterness, not through conflict, but simply because your consciousness no longer resonates with the old frequencies. It is as if you were once standing in a crowded marketplace, overwhelmed by noise, and now you have stepped into a quiet garden. The shift is so profound that those who need the noise cannot walk with you into the silence, not because they are less, but because they are not yet ready to hear what the silence reveals. Goldsmith often reminded us, consciousness draws unto itself its own. This is not mysticism. This is law. As you awaken, you unconsciously withdraw your consent for fear-based interactions. You lose interest in conversations driven by anxiety or anger. You cannot sustain relationships built upon mutual limitation. You cannot engage in patterns that deny the truth of your being. This withdrawal is not willful. It is natural. You are no longer nourished by what once fed the personal sense. You have tasted the presence, and everything less than that presence begins to fade of its own accord. Now hear this, beloved. You are not losing people. You are shedding identities. The identity they knew is passing away. The identity you are realizing is emerging. And as this inner transformation unfolds, new relationships, those who resonate with the same presence, will be drawn to you without effort, without seeking, without searching. They will appear at the exact moment they are needed. They will recognize the light in you, for it is the same light unfolding in them. These are not relationships based on need, but on recognition, not on fear, but on truth. But let us not overlook this. Even those who seem to fall away are not lost. They are included in the same presence that holds you. And when the time is right, and if their consciousness ripens, they too may return, not as they were, but as the deeper self-awakening in them. So do not mourn what appears to be ending. Do not resist what is changing. Do not cling to what is dissolving. Everything that is real is eternal. Everything that is unreal cannot be held. As you grow spiritually, relationships shift not to punish you, but to free you. Free you from the bonds of personal sense. Free you from the roles that confined you. Free you from fearing loss. Free you from seeking completion in another. For the one who has discovered the I am within can meet every person not from need, but from fullness, not from dependence, but from love, not from fear of being alone, but from the joy of sharing the presence that lives in all. This is why relationships shift during awakening, not to diminish your life, but to prepare you to love in a new way, a way that flows from oneness rather than separation, a way that arises from spirit rather than personality, a way that reflects the Christ rather than the conditioned self. Beloved, now that we have understood the nature of loneliness and the shifting of relationships, let us enter the heart of this teaching, how loneliness itself becomes a doorway into mystical realization. If you will receive this truth now, with an open and listening heart, loneliness will never again appear as an enemy. For in spiritual life, nothing comes to harm you. Everything is a teacher. Everything is a passage. Everything is an invitation. Loneliness is not something to escape. It is something to observe, to stand within, and ultimately to transform. When the sense of personal companionship fades, when the old ways of relating dissolve, when you feel the emptiness that once frightened you, stop. Do not seek distraction. Do not run back into familiar patterns. Do not fill the silence with noise or movement. Pause. This pause is the foundation of Goldsmith's teaching. It is the doorway through which the presence becomes known. The moment loneliness arises, do not engage the story around it. Do not describe it to yourself. Do not argue with it. Do not analyze it. Simply ask, very quietly, who is the I that feels lonely? Do not rush to answer. Do not search for an insight. Do not try to change anything. Just hold the question in the stillness of your being in that moment. A sacred separation occurs. Not a separation from others, but a separation from the false identity that claims loneliness. You will discover that the sense of loneliness belongs only to the personal self, the egoic self, the limited sense of me that has accompanied you through the dream of separation. It is not you who is lonely. It is the fading identity that feels itself slipping away. When you observe loneliness without identifying with it, loneliness begins to loosen its grip. It cannot survive observation. It cannot remain when the light of awareness falls upon it. It is like mist dissolving in sunlight. Now listen carefully. The dissolving of loneliness is not the goal. The recognition of the I am is the goal. Loneliness simply becomes the doorway. If you can learn to meet loneliness with stillness, with silence, with awareness, you will find that it transforms into something altogether different. It becomes a spaciousness, an inner clarity, a deep quiet that is not empty but full of presence. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of the desert blooming. The desert is the absence of personal sense. The blooming is the revelation of the presence. When you pause in the midst of loneliness, you will begin to sense something subtle, something gentle, something that cannot be grasped by the intellect. You may feel a warmth behind the heart, or a softening around the mind, or a sense of being held without any external cause. This is not emotion. This is not imagination. This is not the mind comforting itself. This is the presence making itself known. And if you will continue to pause, each time loneliness rises, each time fear arises, each time the personal sense trembles, you will begin to live in a new rhythm. The pause becomes a sanctuary. The silence becomes a companion. The stillness becomes a teacher. This is what Joel Goldsmith called practicing the presence. Practicing the presence is not thinking about God. It is not requesting God. It is not visualizing or affirming. It is recognizing that the very I which observes loneliness is not the lonely self at all. It is the infinite self, the I am, the Christ appearing as your individual consciousness. The moment you recognize this, even faintly, loneliness turns from a problem into a practice, from suffering into initiation, from emptiness into revelation. Here is the mystical principle. Loneliness is the veil that hides the presence. The pause tears the veil. Recognition reveals the presence behind it. Not by effort, not by struggle, not by technique, by stillness, by awareness, by willingness to stand in the silence. As you practice this, Loneliness will visit you less frequently, and when it does arise, you will not fear it. You will meet it as a spiritual ally, knowing that it comes only to draw you inward, to release you from attachment to the personal sense, and to open you to the companionship that has always been within you. In time, and that time may be sooner than you expect, you will discover that loneliness no longer touches you at all. Not because you have filled your life with people, not because you have solved your emotional needs, but because the I am has become your abiding awareness. And where the I am is recognized, isolation is impossible, beloved. As the inner work deepens, as the I am becomes more real to you than the personality you once believed yourself to be, a new challenge arises not within, but around you. You begin to notice that the world does not understand the shift that has taken place in your consciousness. And why should it? The world judges everything by appearances. The world sees persons. The world sees behaviors. The world interprets from separation, but the awakening that is occurring within you cannot be seen with physical eyes. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. It is not a public event. It is a silent unfolding of spiritual identity, and only those who are attuned to that same unfolding will recognize it. Do not expect the world to understand what God is doing within you. The world cannot understand silence. The world cannot understand peace. The world cannot understand detachment from fear. The world cannot understand why you no longer rush to fix conditions, to defend opinions, to enter arguments, to join in collective anxieties. The world cannot understand how you can sit in the midst of trouble, yet remain still. The world does not understand because the world sees only the outer, while awakening happens in the inner. And so, beloved, you may notice that your peace makes others uneasy. Your silence may disturb those who have not met silence within themselves. Your freedom from fear may seem unrealistic to those who still worship fear as their god. Your refusal to speak judgment may confuse those who gain their energy from conflict. This is not your failing. This is not their failing. This is the nature of awakening. When you shift from the personal sense to the recognition of the presence, you begin to live by a different law. You live by the law of spirit. You live by the law of oneness. You live by the law of revelation rather than reaction. And the world around you will try sometimes forcefully to pull you back into its rhythm, not out of malice, but out of misunderstanding. The world fears what it cannot categorize, and silence is a language it has not learned. You may hear things such as, "Why don't you worry about this? Don't you care? Why aren't you angry? Why won't you defend yourself? Why aren't you reacting like everyone else?" And if you are not rooted in the truth, you may begin to doubt your awakening. You may wonder if something is wrong with you, if you have grown cold, if you have become detached from life. But hear me now. You are not becoming detached from life. You are becoming detached from illusion. There is a vast difference. You are not losing your heart. You are discovering the heart of God. You are not rejecting humanity. You are seeing humanity through the eyes of oneness. You are not withdrawing from the world. You are perceiving the world without being imprisoned by it. This is what it means to live in truth while the world continues in appearance. Your task is not to convince anyone. Your task is not to justify your peace. Your task is not to defend your awakening. Your only task is to remain in inner alignment. no matter how the outer world responds, Goldsmith said. Do not attempt to bring truth down to the level of human belief. Lift your consciousness above belief and rest there. You cannot drag spiritual awareness into human conflict, but you can rise above conflict into spiritual awareness. When others misunderstand you, pause. When they pressure you, pause. When they judge your stillness, pause. When they fear your freedom, pause. And in that pause, recognize the truth. There is only one presence. There is only one power. There is only one life. And that life is living itself as you. Do not be tempted to abandon your peace in order to appear normal. Do not shrink your light to match the world's dimness. Do not silence the truth in you to protect the comfort of those who fear it. Walk gently, yes. Walk compassionately, yes. Walk without judgment, certainly. But do not walk back into the darkness simply because others have not yet seen the dawn. You will discover something miraculous, even without speaking, even without explaining, even without trying. Your very presence becomes a teaching. People may feel calmer in your company without knowing why. They may sense clarity they cannot explain. They may feel lifted without a single word being spoken. This is not your personality. This is the Christ shining quietly through your consciousness. This is the presence living as you learn to remain inwardly anchored in the I am. The world will slowly shift around you, not by your effort, but by the silent radiance of a consciousness no longer governed by fear. You are not of this world's vibration anymore. You are in the world, but no longer bound to it. You are touched by a higher rhythm, a deeper harmony, a silent music the world has not yet learned to hear. And in time, without seeking, without striving, those who are ready will be drawn to you, not to the personality, but to the presence that shines through the personality. This is how you live in a world that does not understand the shift, not by hiding the shift, not by resisting the world, but by standing inwardly in truth and letting your life become a quiet invitation for others to awaken. Beloved, we have walked through the false sense of isolation, through the dissolving of old relationships, through the inner companionship of the I am, and through the challenge of living in a world that has not yet awakened. Now we come to the sacred culmination of this journey, the moment loneliness disappears. And I must tell you at the outset, loneliness does not end through effort. Loneliness does not end because you solve a problem. Loneliness does not end when someone comes into your life. Loneliness does not end by improving the human scene. No, beloved. Loneliness ends spontaneously the moment the personal sense of I yields to the divine I am. It ends not because something is added, but because something false is removed. Loneliness ends at the exact instant you realize, truly realize, not merely believe that the presence within you is not a presence beside you, not a presence around you, but the very essence of yourself. When this dawns, even faintly, even momentarily, loneliness collapses like a shadow exposed to light. It is not pushed away. It is not healed. It is recognized as never having been real. Let us examine this carefully, quietly, reverently. Loneliness belongs to the belief that you are a separate person living in a separate body, in a separate mind, in a separate world. Loneliness is the voice of the finite self, crying out because it believes itself cut off from its source. But the moment the false sense is released, the moment the veil of personal identity begins to thin, you discover something extraordinary. You are not a person searching for God. You are God expressing as person. You are not a branch begging for the vine. You are the vine appearing as branch. You are not consciousness inside a body. You are the infinite showing forth in a form. This recognition may come in a moment of deep stillness, perhaps in meditation, perhaps while walking, perhaps while sitting quietly in your room, or it may come unexpectedly while washing dishes, listening to the rain, pausing between breaths. It comes not through strain, but through surrender. The moment you stop trying to feel connected, the moment you stop attempting to force spiritual experience, the moment you stop pleading for presence, the moment you become still inwardly, something shifts. A gentle warmth spreads through the chest. A subtle expansion arises behind the heart. A soft clarity settles in the mind. A quiet joy flickers like a candle lit from within. And you know, without thinking, without analyzing, without seeking, that you are not alone, because you cannot be alone. The I that you are is not capable of separation. In that moment, no one enters the room. No voice speaks. No vision appears. Nothing changes externally, and yet everything changes. For you have touched not emotionally, not intellectually, but spiritually the truth that God is the self of you. This realization dissolves loneliness at its root. It does not comfort the lonely self, it removes the lonely self, and in its place rises the awareness of oneness, so profound, so delicate, so sacred, that words can only point to it. A sense of being held without hands, a sense of being guided without instruction, a sense of being accompanied without company, a sense of belonging without belonging to anyone. This is not the end of relationships. This is the beginning of true relationship. For only when you are whole within yourself can you meet others without need, without fear, without expectation, purely, freely, lovingly. Loneliness disappears not because you find love, but because you discover that you are the love you were seeking, and in that realization, the world becomes new. People appear not as potential companions nor as threats to your solitude, but as expressions of the same presence that animates your being. You do not seek from them. You do not cling to them. You do not fear losing them. You relate to them through the I am. And in that relating, there is warmth, tenderness, humor, kindness, and compassion without attachment, without grasping, without dependence. This is the miracle. Loneliness ends when the illusion of the personal self ends. And the illusion of the personal self ends in the recognition of the I am self. Beloved, once this moment has happened, even if only once, it leaves a mark upon your being. You may drift again into the old sense of identity, but you can never fully believe in separation again. The memory of truth will call you back, gently, lovingly, persistently, and each time you return, the truth grows clearer, the presence grows stronger, and the illusion grows thinner, until one day you find that loneliness has simply vanished from your vocabulary, from your experience, from your consciousness, not because you escaped it, but because you awakened from it. This is the moment loneliness disappears, when the one within you becomes more real than the many outside you, when the presence becomes your constant awareness, when the I am becomes the self you live from, And from that moment on, beloved, you walk the earth no longer as a seeker, but as a living expression of the infinite. Beloved, as we come to the close of this inner journey, I invite you once more into the quiet, into that sacred stillness where truth is not spoken but revealed. We have traveled together through the illusion of isolation, through the dissolving of old identities, through the companionship of the I am, through the shifting of relationships, through the challenges of awakening in a world still asleep, and finally, to the radiant moment when loneliness disappears in the light of truth. But now, let us gather all of these threads into one simple, eternal realization. There is only one, not one person, not one mind, not one body, but one presence, one life, one consciousness appearing as all. This is the foundation of all mystical teaching. This is the heart of the infinite way. This is the essence of Christ consciousness. And it is this oneness that is calling you home now, not to a place, not to a doctrine, not to an experience, but to the recognition of your true identity. You have never been a separate self wandering through a hostile world. You have never been a lonely soul searching for connection. You have never been an abandoned being pleading for God's attention. You have been and remain the self of God, the I am appearing as your individuality, the infinite expressing in the language of your life. Everything you believed about separation was part of the dream, and the dream is fading. Everything you thought you needed from the world was part of the false identity, and that identity is dissolving. Everything you feared, everything you lacked, everything you longed for, these were shadows cast by a self that never truly existed, for only the I am is real. Only the presence is real. Only the infinite expressing as you is real. And so, as we close, let us rest in this sacred truth. You cannot return to oneness because you have never left it. You can only awaken to it. You can only remove the veil of the personal sense. You can only release the belief in separation. You can only surrender the illusion of being a self apart from God. And when the veil lifts, even slightly, even momentarily, you realize that everything you sought was already present within you. The peace you longed for was the peace of your own being. The love you desired was the love that is your nature. The companionship you yearned for was the presence that lives as you. The connection you craved was the oneness that has always been. Beloved, this teaching is not given to make you better. It is given to awaken you to the truth that you are already whole. It is not offered to help you escape life. It is offered to reveal that the life living you is divine. It is not intended to change your human story. It is intended to free you from identification with the story entirely. You walk now not as a seeker of truth, but as the expression of truth. You walk not as a lonely individual, but as the infinite showing forth in individual form. You walk not with a heart burdened by separation, but with a heart illumined by the presence that cannot leave you, for it is you. As you go forth from this teaching, remember, you do not travel alone. You never have, you never will. The I am goes with you, because the I am is the you that goes. Rest in this truth. Walk gently, remain inwardly still, and whenever the world tries to convince you that you are separate, remind yourself, I and the Father are one. I and the presence are one. I and the I am are one. There is only one. And that one is my being. Beloved, this is your return, not to a place, not to a belief, but to the eternal truth of your identity. Live from this knowing. and your entire world will quietly transform from within.